came from Marjorie Sigley, and she was asked to do a series of programmes about words, letters of the alphabet. There was going to be a whole series of these, and she pretty much, after we did Words, 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 which was a show that Grant and I had first worked on separately, she said to me, the next part of the strategy, we've done words, we're now going to do letters, so have you got any ideas for a show about letters of the alphabet? And it was like a one-page pitch. I put down this idea, which was very based on a sort of Alice in Wonderland idea, about a little girl travelling across a board game, which was called, well, it wasn't called Letterland, but every square was a different letter of the alphabet. And in each square she would meet different... there'd be adventures like, I remember, and we didn't do any of these, but like something like The Revenge of the Killer Bees and things like that, or Under the Sea. They're all puns. But the basic idea was that she would go through a board game, and every square, every land was a different letter. And on the T square, one of the characters, it wasn't a major character, there would be T.Bag.
Well, I went for an interview, an audition, as I thought, for Thames Television it was then, for a children's programme, how to teach children to read. That's what I was told it was. I got to the interview and it was Leon Thor. And I think, I've got a feeling that Marjorie Sigley was there as well. But this is what I remember about it. That Leon said, teaching children to read. Be interesting kind of magical thing. He said he was waving a stick about. It might have been a golf thing, I can't remember. Do you think you could do that? It's kind of witch character. Do you think you could do that? I said, yeah, I could do that. And I left. I didn't hear anything about it. No scripts. I couldn't read for it. So I thought, oh, well. And I got the job. Just the next day, my agent phoned and said, oh, perhaps it was a week later or something like that. Oh, they'd like you to do it. So that was it, really. Can you do it? Like as if I was going to say no.
Well, my mum says that I was a very precocious child and I was always kind of on about wanting to be on television and sort of used to write letters to Jimmy Savile. I don't know if they ever got sent, but that was my avenue. That was kind of what I thought was the kind of the way to do it. And then she saw an advert for, it was actually, Sylvia Young Theatre School. She was just starting up a business and was just sort of advertising for children. I think she's kind of turning people away now rather than advertising, but... Yes, we were kind of, me and my sisters were sort of the first clients on her book, really.
I'm trying to remember what was happening, because it's a while ago. And what I remember is that I used to live in Teddington. And Teddington is very close to where the Thames studios are. In fact, it's down the road. And in all the years, I must have lived there for maybe eight or 9 years. In all the time I lived in Teddington, I never worked at Thames. If I did any television, it was for the BBC or ITV somewhere else. Excuse me. So I was working at the National Theatre, and that was quite a drive every day to go into the National Theatre from Teddington. So we eventually decided, why don't we move into town? So we did, to be closer to work. And I saved like 28 hours a week driving. So I moved into town, and I think shortly after we moved into our house, which is near Battersea Park in London, I got this phone call from my agent saying, would I go out to Thames Television? I thought, I don't believe this, we just moved away. And to meet Leon Thau, the director of a new children's series. And I said, great, could I see the script? And they said, well, it's really an idea at the moment. They don't really have scripts, but they know who the character is or the characters. And I said, oh, characters? Yeah, they want someone who's able to play a whole range of characters. So I thought, okay. So I drove out to Thames, and I met Leon. And we had a chat, and he said, he said, I hear you're quite versatile. And I said, yeah, I think I am. And he said, I said, man of many parts, most of them missing. He didn't laugh. And then he talked about himself for about 2 hours. And so it was I thought, what am I doing here? There's no script to read. There was no opportunity for me to say, well, can I show you what I can do? Can I read different characters? And in the fullness of time, I was offered the part.
It was fantastic because before then I'd only really been in, I'd done a few commercials and a play for BBC Two, and I was in an episode of something, you know, a police drama, but never really done anything that major. So it was really, really exciting. And I was only 10 when I got the part, so you know, still really young and sort of filled with awe of everything. So it's very, very, very exciting.
The show was conceived quickly. They said, go, you're on, we start then, and there was no time, and we were kind of making it up as we went along quite a lot of the time. There was no title, and that's why the actors will tell you when they came to audition, there was nothing for them to read. You know, they were being hired before the scripts were even finished, or perhaps even before they were started. And then we realised that we needed T-shirt. You know, we had to have someone for T.Bag to talk to. We had the first thought was we might have a puppet. We had this idea for a bat, didn't we? A pun on alphabet. It was Alpha Bat.
Alfie.
Alfie, that's it, Alfie Bat. And then we were always kind of bored with the idea of it being a puppet, and we thought it'd be better if it was an actor. So
94 episodes with a talking bat.
My sister was a dancer, and she'd been dancing since she was really young. And then she went on an audition, and my mum took her along and had to take me along as well, because it was the school holidays. And the casting director said, oh, he should go in as well. And my mum famously said, oh, no, he doesn't do anything. And anyway, I went in and got the part, and it was a McVitie's cake commercial. This was when I was 7 years old. So they could have sent me up the chimneys, but no, they sent me in to do adverts instead. And then when I was 8 or 9, I think, that's when I did the Children's Film Foundation film Breakout. And because of that, that's how I got T.Bag, apparently. That's what they tell me anyway. The executive producer at the time, a woman called Marjorie, and Charles, who was the producer, saw me in the film Breakout, and then apparently that's why they kind of said, oh, we got this boy who would be great to be in T.Bag.
The thing about John, you see, it was entirely like working with another actor. And so I made no concessions at all to his extreme youth. He was marvellous, actually, because he's got a marvellous equilibrium, so he never got very stressed or upset.
They were so welcoming and so supportive of me as a child, you know. I mean, not all actors are like that. They tend to be patronising or, you know, don't have time for you. But they, like I say, they were so supportive and so welcoming that actually it just made it really easy. And I never questioned it. I never kind of thought, wow, you're so amazing. As you get older, as I got older by sort of series 4 or 5, and I was a teenager and more aware of, you know, being an actor and acting, I suppose, specifically. But when you're 9 years old, you just go on and you just show off. That's what you do. You don't really kind of question it too much.
I remember getting on really, really well with John. We had a fantastic tutor as well called Janet, and she was really nice, because how it worked was that we'd get in the morning, do the rehearsals. If we weren't rehearsing one of our scenes, we'd sort of nip into the back room. It was in an old church hall, I think. Is that right? Mm. Yeah. And so we'd sort of nip into another room and do some more studies. But then because we had a requisite sort of number, I think it was only like 3 or 4 hours a day or something, but then we had to stay on afterwards, so everybody else would go home. And we'd stay there for a bit longer. So I had and we had a chaperone as well. You know, somebody who took us to the rehearsal place and back again. And so we sort of had an hour and a bit each way car journey with each other. Then all the time on set, and then all the time with our tutor as well. So we spent a lot of time together. But it was really good. We were having a couple of fights, but generally getting on really, really well.
The children were great, and I enjoyed that because I could see. As I had been a child actor myself, I was fascinated to see how they worked, and they worked so hard, and of course they learned their lines so easily and so quickly, being children, whereas I used to be up all night trying to learn these long myriad speeches that I had and the different accents that I had to do.
You know, as a child, I mean, I watch my son now doing it as well, and you have this amazing ability as a child to really be able to sort of immerse yourself in what you're doing and block out your surroundings. So, you know, when we're walking through kind of the jungle or the desert or something, you could really, really believe that you were in this book or the game or, you know, whatever the scene was. And, yeah, I mean, I just found the whole thing really magical.
Yes, the gardener was quite sweet. I don't quite know where he came from, because there wasn't really much time to do any kind of real preparation. You got the script and immediately it had to be, you know, like doing a lightning sketch. Yeah, so we went for the pink hair. I think I looked up a book of clowns' faces, and I also looked, I was very interested in the artist Egon Schiele, who's done some wonderful paintings. Austrian artist. And there was a kind of sadness about this clown, so I think I got some ideas from just looking at these very quick pictures and deciding that's what he should look like. And interestingly enough, you know, in the old days, actors used to have their skip, what they call the skip, this great big, you know, box where they keep all their old costumes. I have a drawer at home where I keep things from plays that I really enjoy doing. And these are the gardener's gloves, which I found the other day when Lee rang and said, we're going to do this. There they are. Oh, T.Bag!
Liz was brilliant because she was so much more sophisticated, you know, and so much more subtle than just a person playing a witch. You know, she had all sorts of other levels. So we were delighted, with her.
Really
and
pleased.
with Jim was fantastic. A brilliant actor. You know, we wondered why he was doing the show, but, you know, it was great to have him. And Jenny was fantastic as well. We were really lucky.
You know, when you hear people talking about the times when they were, you know, they say, oh, it's like a big happy family. But, I mean, everyone's so lovely. And because John and I were the only children there, we were surrounded by adults. And they really, really looked after us. And you know, Liz especially. So, you know, he never took it too seriously when she said she was going to vaporise me or kind of, you know. Don't remember ever being particularly scared of her.
Well, we were told that the title of the show was going to be Wonders in Letterland, which we didn't like at all. But then it turned out that there were a series of books, there were reading books called Letterland books, and they were very popular books in schools. You know, lots of kids have been reading these. And apparently the person who had written these books had been in to see Marjorie Sigley at some point to try and say, you know, do we think you can get these Letterland books on television? We didn't know any of this. We were just told the title was Wonders in Letterland. As soon as the first series hit the screen, obviously there was an injunction taken out so that the name could never be used again. And then after that, it became known as Trouble with T.Bag.
We didn't call it that either. That was just somebody else, Marjorie or Charles or Leon, who knows who.
But the interesting thing was, by that time, T.Bag had become the main focus of the show. Yeah. So, you know, it was actually rather good that T.Bag was now in the title, and it was in the title ever after.
Mm.
And I was in the T-square, or this character was in the T-square, and it was going to be a kind of a witch. But it was all about teaching children to read.
We didn't play it as if, and now you're going to learn, you know, how to spell, you're going to learn this. We just played the story, and the storylines were always very strong. And the characters, I mean, once you get the characters right, once the characters are organic, have roots, then people will believe in them. And I think children loved it. Well, it was so inventive, it was so entertaining, that also it was highly educational, but it was presented in such a kind of pleasant, easy way that children were learning a lot without realizing it, I think. And so it was successful on so many different levels.
But the scripts were so lively, and there was obvious scope for comedy in them as well as just being, you know, a boring old witch.
You see, we never thought of T.Bag as being a witch. We never said that this is a witch. That was Leon. Leon Thor, the director, kept saying, "This is a witch." And we kept saying, but... See, that brings a lot of baggage with it, that, forgive the pun, but, you know, it brings cackling.
When you say witch, you know, and it was very relevant at the time, grot bags, you know, I mean, that was a witch, you know, green-faced, pointy hat, everything that we didn't want to do, you know, was grot bags. No, T.Bag was very elegant, and she was, you know, she was a sorceress of some kind.
Yeah,
but,
certainly a magical character. But,
you know, but Leon just said, the witch does this.
We kept saying, she's not a witch. She's not a witch. She's not a witch. How many ways can we say it?
You know, when I read a script and see a part, I pretty well know what I'm going to do with it, which is the reason I've taken on the job in the first place. So I had to make very quick decisions each week when I got each character to play. So I didn't really have a great deal of time to discuss the character, and Leon wasn't really into discussing. He was into controlling. He was a very talented man as an actor, and he did some writing and as a director. And I kind of feel, I always felt that he wanted to play all the parts himself, that he couldn't bear to see somebody else doing. Because I think he probably did love acting very much. And I'm sure it's very difficult when actors give up acting and become directors. You never lose that wish to perform. And I think he was very frustrated sometimes that why was he not Skipper McKipper? Why wasn't he, you know, playing these characters that I was doing? Obviously not to his taste. He was very he wanted broader strokes, and I tend to be a little bit more I mean, I don't know. I don't go for that kind of very vulgarized acting. And after all, you're on camera, so you don't need to. So we had a few little discussions about that. He always wanted me to do more.
There was a great moment during one of it must have been in T.Bag Strikes Again, the Charlie Chuckles episode, where I was standing there with my camera and Charles Warren suddenly decided he wanted a photograph of Charlie Chuckles with T-shirt, dressed up in their jester's uniform costume. And he just suddenly stopped the filming. He said, hang on a minute. He said, Lee, take a photo. Liam was going nuts. So we're doing a television show. And I had to stop everything because Charles was a producer. He could do what he liked.
It was funny.
And I had to say, stop a minute. Okay, it was great.
Leon used to barge into the studio because most of the time on the studio day he's up in the box, watching it on the monitors. And then every so often you'd hear this growl. You ever seen that scene from Singing in the Rain with the mad director who comes storming out, tripping over cables and things? It was quite like that. And he'd come barging into the studio and push us aside and say, "We're making television pictures here. Get out my way."
Well, he is, I don't know, he is or was a man who, if you're not talking about him, he's not listening. He'd all the subtlety of a can opener, really. And it was a very interesting process. I mean, it was very hard work because we were doing the show every week. We had little rehearsal time, and I was playing, I can't remember many characters, which is the great challenge of playing different people each week. Leon wasn't the most helpful director I've ever worked with, but he got the job done. He was, a hard taskmaster, but wasn't much given to praise. And actors, are like children. We like to be told that we're doing well. We like a little praise from time to time, because, some of the best actors are actually quite insecure, because they never know if it's right until someone out there says, yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's pretty good.
Leon was an auteur. He liked to be in control. He loved it, and he put his stamp on everything. Various people had different relationships with Leon. We were really lucky as kids, because the minute he would start to expand on his stories, we were sort of grabbed by the scruff of our necks, taken into the room next door, and had to do our 3 hours of schoolwork every day. And we did most of that while he was kind of being a raconteur and just telling all his stories, which was fine. And then we'd go back, he'd done all that, everyone was thoroughly bored, and we did rehearsing. So, yeah, I mean, he was a huge influence on the series, for better or worse, depending on your opinion. I have to say, personally, I he was supportive of me, and I think he did a great job, really. I don't think that the turnaround would have been as quick or as efficient without him being on board.
T.Bag was perceived as old-fashioned, and we could inject a bit of sort of
so
street
few people
cred
really seem to understand that that's what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
It was really frustrating. They'd say, "Oh, yes, I don't know, it looks kind of dated," and we said, "But that's the point. It's kind of we're trying to do that. We're trying to take it out of time when we're trying to make it its own thing and not just be Grange Hill with knobs on, And I don't know. Some people got it.
A lot of people.
A lot of people did get
6
it.
million.
The audience. Well, that was the joke. The joke was that the audience got it. And we're sort of eternally grateful that they did. And Glyn got it. Glyn never for a second had a problem with what we were trying to do. He was really supportive.
It changed because it became particularly about T.Bag and T-shirt, and it was less general and more specific. I think that's true to say, because it changed character as it went along, and I think often, and I must say that it might have been partly to do with the relationship between John and myself, because it had a particular charm. And I think very often, if something's evolving as it's being written, that it's a collaborative thing, and that's the way it evolved. Because they didn't really quite know what it was going to be when it first started, not exactly.
Well, of course, initially it was a pun, wasn't it, just on T.Bag, and we never really imagined that the T stood for anything particularly. We just thought it was T.Bag and end of story. But as the focus of the centre of the show started to revolve around T.Bag and T-shirt, they became the heart and soul of the show in a funny way, which is unusual, really, because mostly in a kind of adventure quest show like this, you're kind of more interested in the adventurer, the girl, and rather than the bad guys trying to stop her. And we twisted that round in T.Bag so that we became much more absorbed in the relationship between T.Bag and T-shirt. T.Bag, the ultimate failure, but with the biggest, most grandiose plans.
But at what point did we suddenly say she was called Tallulah? Was there a
I
particular
remember.
reason?
I remember exactly what it was.
I don't remember.
It was series 3, and it was her birthday. And I think we wanted to humanise her. Once Liz really had found the part, which she did very quickly, you know, we really are indebted to Elizabeth actually for really as much as anybody creating the role. And when we saw the way it was playing out with T-shirt, we wanted to sort of make them more human. So we gave them names to do that. We gave T-shirt the name of Thomas. Or you know, mind you, that was earlier on, wasn't
Thomas
it?
in
From the
first
beginning,
episode.
that's right. But T.Bag, it was the birthday episode of Series 3 where he said, "Happy birthday, dear," and then we got to the point where we said, we don't know have a name, so how can he sing "Happy birthday, dear"? T.Bag sounded a bit... And so we kind of wrote in that he ekes out from her name, and she's a bit embarrassed about it, and she finally confesses that her name is Tallulah. And, then we had... Once we found that, we thought that's just the right name for her, actually. Tallulah Bankhead was a famous Hollywood actress in the same kind of mould. And
But actually, luckily for us, it was a fantastic idea, because then when Liz left and we needed a new T.Bag, all we had to do was say, well, her initial T stands for Tabitha, and we could have gone on doing that forever while there were still T names, available. So it was actually really handy as well.
But I think I went to a state school, as I said, and I had a really hard time. The first series was brilliant. I was still at primary school. The second 2 series, I was at senior school. And it was a case of taking a term out at a time. And it was always the start of the school year, or seemed to be. I think that was right. So I'd kind of go back to school, and everybody had made their own friendship groups. And I just wanted to just be a normal kid and go to school and not be recognised as, as somebody who's different. And so I think that probably came across, because by the third series, I was definitely going through kind of quite a difficult adolescence. And I think I was probably a little bit stroppy. So I wasn't asked to do it again. And I think this might just be sour grapes, that had I been asked, I'd have probably said no anyway. But, who knows? And then, then I suppose I regretted it. And then when I was sort of 16, 17, I kind of thought, I'd like to do... get into acting again. But by then, I didn't really have the contacts, and didn't have the... You have to have so much perseverance, don't you? And I just didn't have it. And now, I just live a sort of a normal family life, and it's kind of what I want.
Because it felt like things had completely changed around. The dynamic had changed. But having said that, I think, to be honest, that was series 4. And by then, myself and Elizabeth had just cemented such a relationship, and we were kind of working so well together, I guess, that actually it didn't affect us too much. And it was Diana that came in at that point, right? Yeah. So the girl that came in at that point, I think, obviously it was more difficult for her than it was for us, the change, because, the format of the series didn't change. It was literally just a new girl. So, yeah, it kind of felt a bit weird that things were changing, because obviously, there was a formula, and that was what it was. But at the same time, yeah, I think myself and Liz had a good, strong relationship, and that didn't affect us too much, really.
But the trouble is, when you start, producers like to fiddle around, and they like to think that they've got a role, and so it doesn't really matter whether somebody's working perfectly. They will find things to change, whether it's saying, as did happen, when we were told there were going to be major changes in T.Bag, and the changes ended up being, could T-shirt not wear a baseball cap? That was it, But they sometimes, they like to, we'll get a new girl, we'll get a new this, we'll get, it's just ridiculous. Then they cast somebody and they're stuck with them for 10 weeks, and then have to recast them again, It does happen a lot.
And I think it was just, it wasn't that people didn't get sacked because they were hopeless or whatever. It was just this quest to try and find somebody that might be a bit better still.
3 girls altogether, wasn't it? There was, Jenny first, Diana, and Kelly. Now, it's partly you reflect the where you are in the programme is reflected in your relationship just slightly. I know it's a very obvious thing to say, So I never felt quite as close to the girls because we were always daggers drawn in the show. I never felt quite as close to the girls as I did to John. They all had a separate identity. To be honest with you, I think that Diana seemed older than the others. Is that because perhaps she was a bit old? She seemed more mature than the others. And therefore, she was a little bit more... I felt a little bit more nervous of her. I mean, I'm talking about the character felt a bit more nervous of her. It always seemed as if... Now, I can only talk in character terms. It always seemed as if Jenny's character, Debbie, was going to be very easy to squash because she seemed so small and dainty in her little puff sleeve things. And then she never was, you know, catching all her... She was after the letters, wasn't she? And Kelly, was a bright by name and bright by nature, you know. She's a pretty bright blue-eyed little thing. So I think Grant's right, I can't separate the playing of them, you know, the playing of the character's feelings about the girls from my own quite. Except I got on very well with all of them. They were all lovely to work with.
It was just a straightforward audition. I belonged to a children's agency called Sylvia Young, and I just got sent along and had to read part of a script. But I can remember being very, very excited because, like many children my age, I mean, I was only 10 when I did the show, and I was coming in on series 5. So, I mean, I remember watching Jenny and absolutely adoring the programme, so I was so excited about it. I can't remember thinking, oh, I bet I don't get it, or I really, really, really want... I mean, I really wanted to get it, but I didn't... I can't really remember the sort of emotions tied up in it, but I do remember the absolute sheer excitement when I knew I was going to be doing it, and really mainly because I wanted to disappear on screen, because that was something that fascinated me. I was, you know, like most children, how do they disappear? It's amazing. So yeah, I was very excited to do it, but it was just an audition.
Because the fact is, it's hard enough to find grown-up professional actors who can be funny, never mind trying to ask inexperienced kids to be funny. And what a blessing it was to find John Hassler, because the minute he arrived, we went, a kid who can act. You know, they're pretty few and far between, to be honest, especially when it comes to comedy. There's a lot of kids who can come on and do soap operas and be okay and be quite proficient and learn their lines and do it. But to come on and be funny week after week, studio day after studio, it's a hard find that, you know, to find kids who can do that.
You know, it is easier doing drama, really.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, kids who can cry and moan and everything. You know, but, you know,
and so
get funny kids is
so you end up with some girl actors who've had the experience perhaps of doing, you know, sort of heavy drama at school, and they come in with that, and they're asked to sort of do all this sort of slightly campy stuff, and they're a bit all at sea with it. And why wouldn't they be? You know, it's why I don't like.
So some of the girls, you know, some of the, you know, during the middle period just seem to sort of wander through it looking a bit moody and sort of stroppy, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like, you know, Jenny and Kelly, you know, they were much more lively. You know, they were great.
Well, Kelly was one of the ones who came who just had that natural, you know, talent just glowing out of them, and they would just do what you hope they all would do, which is just play it truthfully and real, but at the same time, do it up a bit. You know, ratchet up so that the reality, it wasn't naturalistic, but it was truthful.
It was just like being in a big children's storybook. You know, I mean, it was just a dream come true. Every child has a huge imagination, and here I was, week in, week out, pretending to be in space, back in time, in America. I mean, it was just in the desert. It was fantastic. I mean, it really was brilliant, fun, and that was it, really.
It affected my social life a lot, to be honest with you, because we would start recording at the beginning of the 6 weeks holiday and then end, depending on the series, sort of October, November of the same year. So, you know, whereas all my mates kind of had 6 weeks of going out and playing, basically, I would always be working. And then, obviously, come September, everyone would go back to school and I would have a tutor at T.Bag. And to be honest, it didn't affect my schooling a huge amount because I was so lucky that I had a great tutor, this woman called Janet. At the time, I kind of thought, oh, this is a bit of a pain. But actually, with hindsight, I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
No, when we were filming, it was fairly intense, and so John and I were literally doing our lessons together, and I wasn't going to school, as it were. But I still saw my friends and things. I don't remember missing out on seeing other children. One thing that I do remember, and I still use it today, is that John and I used to shoot pool when we weren't doing our schoolwork, because there was a pool table in the rehearsal room, and I actually got quite good at it, and I still now, I'm one of those, if there's a guy kind of showing off going, oh, come on, girls can't play pool, and I'm pretty good, actually, from those days. I suppose John was a real inspiration to me, really. Partly because I suppose he was closer to me in age than anybody else on the set. But he was a bit older than me, so I sort of idolised him a little bit. And also he'd been doing the show since the beginning, and he knew, he was very, very good at what he did, and he knew how to... He worked really hard, he was really professional.
In terms of production, the show changed hugely. In terms of me, it was kind of a weird thing, like you say, growing up on TV, like Gary Coleman or something, but actually growing up, which was great. And Lee and Grant as the writers were really good to me in that they actually, changed the character. So when I was a teenager, T-shirt was a lot more stroppy, he was a lot more kind of rebellious, which was really cool. And in fact, in the very last series, there's an episode with me having a shave. So they never kind of denied the fact that I was getting older. I think the only thing is you become obviously more self-aware, not just me being on a TV show, but anyone who's going through puberty. To be honest, they kind of become more self-aware and self-conscious. And a couple of the series I had braces, like fixed braces, top and bottom. And you think, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm on national TV and I've got braces. This is really weird. In terms of the show's production values, it just went from strength to strength, which it should have done. The show got a bigger budget. It was getting more and more successful. We moved from the tiny studio at Thames TV into the bigger studio too, which was just great, and we felt like we were getting more, huge sets and more money being spent on the sets, whereas the first series, it was just a backdrop that wobbled. After that, it became bigger production values, and you've interviewed Ray, who was the costume guy, and he just did amazing work with the budget he had and always made it look spectacular. And we had different outfits every week, and every show obviously had a different theme, and it always looked pretty impressive, I think, for what it was. Having said that, I've not watched it for a while, so I stand to be corrected on that.
If we could have had endless sets and hundreds of characters, I don't think we would have been as imaginative. I think by saying we know we've only got, we do an episode, we've got inside, outside and the tea room, and you've only got two characters, made us incredibly ingenious. Some of the plots are actually, very, very clever. I don't know if we could have had 20 sets and 10 actors, we would have done that. And they make me laugh, actually, when you watch some of the T.Bags. I was watching one the other day, the one about the Russian one, and it's like supposed to be the coronation, and there's like three people standing there. You've got these, it's actually very funny, actually, in a way, because it's T.Bag, you're never going to have, the camera's never going to swing around, there's going to be a crowd of people cheering. There's going to be three people. The Queen has to crown Ivan herself, there's not even anybody to do it, It's really funny.
That is part of the fun of it, actually.
You walk into a cowboy saloon, there's not going to be anybody except Matt Zimmerman sitting there, you know that.
I do get recognised for other things that I've done, but it's T.Bag. T.Bag's the one that I think is probably the most, even now. And It's always a shocker. I mean, I just never expect them to say, you know, the conversation usually I'm usually in the supermarket with no makeup on, my hair scraped back, you know, putting my groceries through, and the checkout girl will go, I recognise your face, you're the telly. And I say, oh, yeah, I've done a bit, yeah. She goes, you were in that T.Bag, right? And that is the moment when I just go, yes, I was.
I get a proportion of letters on a regular basis from people who are now adults, of course, who used to watch it, and say, have I got any? And I haven't actually got any photos of it. But yes, I still get recognised. I get recognised as T.Bag from other actors as well that I'm working with, younger actors who used to watch it as children, and then it dawns on them that they realise that they used to watch, and suddenly just slightly the relationship changes with them, you know, because they go back to being a little boy or girl, whatever they were, yeah.
By series 3 or 4, and it was on, and they would show one, I think, early in the year, and then they repeat a series later in the year, and of course it was just on constantly, and you know, the viewing figures were astronomical at the time because you watched children's BBC or CITV. That's what you watched. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy, and there were some manic experiences where I would I was doing some filming in this school for something else at the time, and the whole school just went nuts, and the kids were like screaming and banging against the railings and all this sort of thing. And then eventually the head teacher came up to us and said, I don't know who you are or what you do, but could you please leave my school? I was like, well, I'm kind of here with the film crew. And it was just, you know, it was absolutely crazy. And nowadays I still get a lot of people say, did I go to school with you? Because they kind of have vague recollections. But certainly when it was on, you know, you couldn't go out or walk down the street without people shouting something. And on the whole, you know, I have to say I've been very fortunate that people were really nice and generally would come up and say nice things about the show. Not always, but mostly.
And I think Thames Television just said, you know, we'll cash in on this, and can you do a book? And we said, yeah, why not? And then we thought, oh, we'll just adapt one of the series. It would be a piece of cake. And as soon as we started to do that, it was obvious you just couldn't do it. The scripts are written for television, and the book had to be something different. Because when you look at the script, it's literally, you know, tea room, cut to a mountainside, cut to it's somewhere else, cut, you know, and it doesn't read at all like a book. So we said, oh, we're going to have to scrap that idea and start again. We'll still make it episodic, you know, there'll still be, you know, we'll still go to these different places, but we have to come up with new stories, and that was it. So,
but we wrote it quite quickly, didn't we? The book, I think, in about, I think it didn't take us longer than about 10 days or something to write it. And
really,
yeah, no, it was quite a quick write. And I remember we sort of did a chapter a day or something, and.
But it was fun, you know, it was different, it was a bit relaxing, you know, it was different from, you know, what we were doing, and we weren't having to collect stuff, we were just coming up with, you know, whatever it was, 10 fun stories. And
But it was a bit more weird, I think, writing prose together. I mean, writing a script together is quite a different proposition from writing prose, where it's, you know, you've got to choose your words, and sentences have got to be created. When we're writing scripts together, the way we'll do it is we'll start with the story and the characters, and, you know, and then I'll maybe act a bit out, and Lee will write and say, and so there's a lot of debate and testing things out, and you get dialogue going because we're speaking. But in a book, it's much more. They went along the thing and up here. And
well, you're doing descriptions. You don't do any descriptions.
Exactly.
You know, you can't. If you're writing a book, you have to describe, you know, what they're seeing. Whether it was a dark cave and a thundery. You know, we're not doing any of that really in the script.
I suppose if we'd been sensible, we would have, you know, given each other the freedom to write a chapter each or something, and. Because we over the years we developed a style that, you know, you can't really tell Lee's work from my work, because we worked so closely for all these years, over 17 years together, writing every dot and comma, and we kind of, our styles are almost identical. So I dare say we could have written the book.
I was glad we did it, actually, because we did get the chance to do other books. Like, they brought out a Spats book, and they pretty much just handed our scripts to somebody who just transcribed them onto the page and then got the credit for this book, which is ridiculous, really, you know. And then they did the same with the Tomorrow People. They just took our scripts, got a guy to just write, you know. So I'm sort of glad that at least we did the T.Bag book ourselves and didn't let them farm it off to somebody else.
When Elizabeth left the show, you said earlier about Jenny Stallwood leaving, you know, to be honest, that was kind of you could cope with that. But when Elizabeth said she was going to leave the show, it was a huge blow, really. And she called me up, which was really sweet of her to do that, and said, "Look, I'm moving on to new things. I hope you don't mind." And I thought that would be it. I really thought, okay, well, we won't do any more. And then obviously they contacted me to say, we're going to carry on, but we're going to get someone else. And that was really bizarre, really, really strange, and took a while to get into, because the show was, by that point, about me and Liz, you know, and our relationship, I think.
Well, you know, I was obviously much younger then, and I had been doing it for 5 years, and the stories were very similar. I think I partly felt that I should move, because it was so comfortable. I could have stayed forever, really, but it seemed the right time to go.
People like to move on. I mean, ask Liz. But, you know, we were sad when she left, that's for sure. 50-odd episodes we did with Liz, and I'd loved her to have gone on and do the rest, but she just felt that I don't know why she left, but all I know is that we were sad to see her go. And
but then we got the pleasure of working with her again on other shows, so we didn't lose
True.
contact. She came into Michelangelo, and she came into Poltergeist. I did a radio series with her, so it was still a relationship that continued. But maybe
also,
after 50 episodes, you feel you want to move on.
I think that's it. And also, the show did go on for nearly 10 years, and we did have the pleasure of working with Georgina. So we came to really like Georgina's take on it as well, and so we got 2 tea bags for the price of one, really.
I hadn't seen the show, so I knew nothing about it. And I'd gone up, I think it was Tottenham Court Road. I'd gone to be interviewed by our producer and executive producer, I think. And we just chatted. And I came home in a deep depression, actually, and I was so grand those days. I thought, I don't want to do kid television. What do I want to do kid television to? Oh, like what we were talking. I thought, kids television, because most of it was pretty awful. And then I got the job, and I thought, God, what am I going to do now? But as Grant was saying, and Lee before, that it wasn't children's television as I'd known it. It was just like doing Play of the Month or Play of the Week to me. And I thought, how great for us to play so many different characters.
We knew that the new T.Bag came crashing into the thing as a kind of an outsider. Even in the way the story went was she kind of barging in and saying, I'm here. So, and our T.Bag wasn't quite so much like that. She just assumed the role of I'm here and everybody comes to me. But in the new series, we had to bring Georgina in as a kind of like a stampede of buffalo into the story. And so she was much more aggressive and pushy and, and so we weren't writing the same character. It wasn't like we just written for Tallulah Bag and Georgina had to make it her own. We did actually write it slightly differently. We knew it would be a different character, and so we didn't want to just do the same again. On the other hand, it was delicate because she had to continue a relationship with T-Shirt, and we didn't want to change it so much that it became a completely different thing.
But by this time, T-Shirt was growing up as well, so the relationship started off with Liz with like a little tiny kid, and it was a sort of mother, a mother-son sort of relationship. And then by the time, T-Shirt was getting bigger, it was such a different, T-Shirt was getting very stroppy, and he was a teenager saying, oh, why do we have to do this? Not another quest. Why do, so their relationship was slightly different anyway. But,
I treated John as though he was my age. And we had that partnership rather than looking down to a child.
Yeah, for me it was kind of really strange because it had become completely second nature by then, and suddenly the whole thing turned on its head. So yeah, it was like starting again, but I guess that gave it a fresh energy as well. I was really upset when Liz left, and Georgina, their approaches differed because they're such different people, basically. And I think that's great. I think if they'd have cast someone to carry on what Liz did, then, I don't know, possibly it could have been a diluted version because Liz did it so incredibly well. Whereas if you cast someone that's just, you know, so different, then obviously you're never actually going to compete with that. Initially, you know, obviously we went back to square one. And Georgina's great. And the first thing she said to me when we met, literally not even a hello or anything, the first thing she said was, "What star sign are you?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, good, we can work together." And that was terrifying. I was, 14? I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared. But, you know, it took a while, but... And you mustn't forget, you know, well, I mustn't forget at the time, it was probably much harder for her than it was for any of us, because the team hadn't changed. It was just her that came in. And, you know, that's a tough call. So she was nervous. We were all nervous. It took a while to find our feet, but once we did, you know, she's just such a great person and just so unique that actually we just formed a different relationship to myself and Liz, but I still think a really good working relationship.
Well, I was very scared, first of all, and very nervous, because when you take over from somebody else, you're always treading on, you know, dodgy ground to start with. Because you've always got the thought, thinking, God, she's bloody terrible. Let's call so-and-so back, get rid of her. So I was a little bit nervous. And also the director, I believe, had done most of the other T.Bags. So you're coming in to a team and you don't quite fit. So I found maybe the first episode very difficult, trying to fit in to everybody else. And then later on, you forgot that and you thought, well, no, I'm here and this is the character that I'm playing, rather than trying to fit in with what you thought everybody wanted.
Her first episode, yes, I did her first episode. I don't know whether I can say I found her witch, but I do remember very, very clearly that she was very nervous. And I mean, like any good actor, you look to the writing for the clue to your character. And I mean, I remember she played a sort of Mae West character in it as the witch. And I've got a funny feeling she grabbed onto that as a focal point. And that, I think, grasping that Mae West sort of character, I think, led her into how she played the witch later on. Because I think when I did it later, when I did Max Clapper, I saw that same sort of quality in her that she had as the Mae West character. And I think that's what she hung on to. But I do remember that first episode with her, and she and the rehearsals, and she was nervous, and she was looking for it all the time. She's not an actress who looks for people to say, "Oh my God, yes, you're doing it right," but you could see that she was very internalizing and looking for a character, and I think she kind of found it to the character, the Mae West character.
And she got worse and worse as she went on. She became pretty impossible. Always thought she was right, always thought she knew everything, and blamed everything onto T-shirt.
I think the main thing about it, I felt it was a production that was ready to have a lot of fun, that might have been a bit repressed in earlier series. I think some of the rehearsals had been a bit sort of tense, and I just wanted it to be fun. So we had as much fun as we possibly could, and we hoped that the fun kind of stuck to the screens. Because I thought the scripts were fun, the cast were brilliant, and once you got over the technicals, because it was quite a technical show to do, that was really, I guess, what I thought of, you know, what I was going to do, let the fun happen and sort the technicals.
For us, it was like suddenly the show was a real treat to be working on. It's quite well known that we had a prickly relationship with the director. Quite a lot of people did for the first half a dozen series. But when Glyn took over, suddenly here was somebody who really seemed to just immediately click into what we were trying to do with the show. And
I mean, he'd just been doing Tiswas, so, you know, immediately you knew this guy had a good sense of humour. You know, from his Punch and Judy work, he'd obviously into very physical comedy, And suddenly it was just a breath of fresh air, you know, and he was thrown in the deep end, you know, having to sort of deal with Christmas specials with Glenda Jackson and, you know, and Georgina and every, you know, I mean, but he was great. He was, you know, exactly what we needed, really, and everybody loved him, and
I think
the atmosphere changed so much that day. Really.
I've been working in kids' television a lot. I'd done a couple of series of Tiswas. I'm a great fan of comic theatre and slapstick, and I thought, excellent, this will be fun. And the first show I was brought in to do was the one where Glenda Jackson was the guest star. So that was quite a scary moment, really, because I was, in terms of being freelance, I hadn't been freelance all that long, and you walk into this enormous rehearsal room with a vast number of people around a table for a read-through, and there's a lot of people who've never met before, and there's, you know, a major Oscar-winning star there.
Glenda and I had worked before in the theatre, so I thought, well, you never know in life. You've got to ask. People can only say yes, no, or I'll think about it. So I asked her. She instantly said yes, and there we were, doing our song and dance.
And I remember it particularly because the producer of the series, Charles Warren, went round the table introducing everyone. And because he was also aware of Glenda's sort of amazing mega starage, he simply forgot to introduce her. He came to her, he just didn't acknowledge she was there, skipped on to the next person, went round the table. So when he'd done all the introductions, Glenda said, well, what about me? And he said, well, I introduced you. And the entire table said, oh, no, you didn't. So that got us off to an appropriate pantomime start for the series. It was a week's turnaround for one show, which was effectively, I think, like 4 days rehearsal and then a day in the studio. It wasn't too bad because I'd done soap opera. I'd done a series of Crossroads where it was the same turnaround, but you had to do 2 lots of episode. I remember with that particular soap opera, if you hadn't got your first scene in the can 20 minutes after you'd started, you would never catch up. So although T.Bag was quite a... to get it all done in a day was still quite a hard job. It wasn't as hard as some. And since those days things have got even tighter, you'd probably have to do 2 of those per day. But it was good because it was appropriate. It wasn't enough time that you could get self-indulgent, but there was enough time to do a good job, which is something of its era, because I don't think that happens certainly doesn't happen in children's television, particularly, and it probably doesn't happen a lot in any other form of drama, unless it's mega budget. Well, the main thing with T.Bag is that when she kind of, you know, snapped her fingers, things could happen. Now, those could be any things, and if they were complicated, you had to work out in advance, okay, how much studio time am I going to have to give to sorting this particular issue out? Sometimes it was, in one episode, I remember Georgina Hale played herself and an evil version of herself, so she had to double up, and both of whom could vanish and turn into something else. So that was more of working out a chess game in advance and working out how to film it on the day. That meant there could be less opportunity in rehearsals for any ad-lib fun moments, because you thought, no, there's not going to be any time on studio day for anything other than sorting these technical issues, which again could be occasionally complicated, because I remember Georgina Hale picking up a prop that was meant to break when she whacked it over somebody's head, but she actually picked up the wrong prop and whacked somebody over the head, which caused a half-hour break while the actor in question had to go off and be treated and come back. But any production that involves magic and trickery in the days when you kind of had to do it sort of live-ish in the studio and just simple editing it together afterwards, that was your first priority. How long will this take? How will I do it? And how can I make sure that it is, with all due deference to the cast, actor-proof? How can you make it so that whatever happens, it will work? And if they get inspired on the take and do something that isn't quite what you want, is that still going to work in the technical side of it? I really thought the scripts were very, very funny. It was just a ball to do. I also liked the post-production. that was good because I love sound effects. And the fact that Thames had done all the Benny Hill shows and the guys who were dubbing some of the episodes of T.Bag had worked on the Benny Hill shows and had access to all the kind of strange noises and quirks and bongs and thumps and farts and all the rest of it, that was brilliant. That was like playing in a toy cupboard for me. So that was a bonus.
When I was at the studios in the wardrobe department, I was the sort of Cinderella. I'd come up through the ranks, and the head of department wanted people who'd been to art school and all that, and I had, but not to get all the paperwork and stuff. So I worked my way up through the ranks, and then I became a designer, and I didn't get any of the big shows like Rumpole or the Bailey and all that. I'd get lots of children's things like Rainbow, and you know, they were ideal for me. I was young and I had that sort of flair for that sort of thing, and this came along and they said, oh, it's about a witch and 2 children. I thought, great. So I was sent forward to see the head of children's, and Marjorie Sigley, I think it was, and she said, well, this is about a witch called T.Bag, so can you dress her in a brown square like a tea bag? I said, tea bag? I said, it's going to look really dreary after 3 weeks. Can't we do something a bit more glamorous? And she said, oh, glamour, yes, that'd be good. Can you do glamour? I thought, can I do glamour? And she said, you know, like the mother witch in Bewitched and Dora. And I said, oh, yes. She said, oh, yes, make it glamorous. Just make T.Bag glamorous.
I just do remember I had a gorgeous frock for the first episode. And they seemed to become more elaborate every week. And I used to be excited about where she was going to go next because I was going to wear another, like being a little girl again. And I was well into my 30s by then, I think.
It was left entirely up to me. Really, I got away with murder. I did so much. And it was so fast, and it was such fun. And it was really, it turned out to be, I think, like 7 years of real fun. I think I did every period in history with different people.
I was always really, really jealous because the others had the fantastic costumes and I only ever had 1 or 2 costume changes. And that was a great source of consolation for me, actually, because the costumes were absolutely fabulous. And, you know, at the time, I think I didn't really realise that it was just Ray and Vanda, you know. I kind of think that I just imagined there was some huge kind of industry behind it all, and they were churning out costumes, and they had, you know, machinists there, and now, I mean, it's only really today that it dawns on me that it was just a man in a sewing machine.
I think the first time she went somewhere, she went to click her hands, and we ran in and we put a big cloak with fur on and trimmings, and they just loved it. So I'll do that more often. So next week she's going to Spain. So okay, so next week there was a Spanish dress. Click, and there she was, and it sort of became part of the thing, really. And then they would give me things. Oh, we could go to Tudor times or something. So it gradually built up. So that I would know that when a new series would start, I would get like 10 scripts. And the first one would always be the Christmas show, which would be the real humdinger, spectacular number with sparkle in. So you'd put all your energies into that. But you'd look through the scripts and there might be, I think it was a very good Tudor one coming up, Renaissance. So I'd buy the fabrics, draw the pictures, and just wait for sizes, whoever the actors were.
Yes, I used to be so jealous that John and Liz used to get to wear different costumes week in, week out, because as Sally, I had my one outfit, really, for the whole thing. But occasionally, we did a Christmas special where I got to wear a huge, enormous restoration sort of frock. And when I played, you know, certain other parts, I got to wear some exciting things. But I can always remember being really jealous, especially of Liz's stuff, because they were always so great and kind of glamorous, I thought.
Ray was a genius, did it all on a shoestring because we didn't have a lot of money given to us for the costumes, and just very, very talented designer.
No, we didn't have a big budget. It was just children's television, and I don't know, but I always did it so economically that in the end nobody bothered me at all. And then of course you'd build up your stock, you'd work up, and I'd have a prop lady who would do all this work like this. So I'd say I want something really, you know, and you draw it all up, and then she'd get money for making that, whereas the dress and stuff would be made by the lady in house. The worst Thames would have to do is pay a bit of extra overtime if you had a lot of stuff on Monday. They might come in on Saturday and finish it off. Many's the time bows would be stitched on just before they got on camera and stuff. And of course, being children's, it's all done with a slight twist. It wasn't terribly realistic, of course. I mean, if it was a Shakespeare or something, you'd have brought it all down. But it was, for what it was great, and it was enjoyable, and we were well paid, so it was a good time.
At the end of most series, when John and I, because we started off as being nemesis of each other, and then as the series, because T.Bag would put this spell on John, and he'd be in her thrall, and then by the end, as the spell was wearing off, he was breaking the spell, we'd always become buddies. And I think probably at one point in each series, he had to kiss me or I had to kiss him, and I just was mortified by this. I don't know if John remembers it, but I remember finding that really, really embarrassing and really, really uncomfortable.
The two that I particularly remember, with help, were the Dallas one, which was a spoof of Dallas, of a soap opera, oh God, those costumes were great, weren't they? And John was the bubble boy, advertising soap, and then there was Doc Leaf and that was from the film What's Up, Doc? And Matt Zimmerman played Doc Leaf.
Well, Doc Leaf sticks in my memory because I did have a song as Doc Leaf where, like I say, Doc Leaf sold this herbal remedy, you see, which basically was a con. It was like an Indian medicine man, if you know what I mean about America at the time. And actually it was just water in it. And it was a herbal remedy, and it didn't sell, so then he sold it as a floor polisher and his shoe shine thing, and, well, anything that he could do. So he was a bit of a con man. But I did have a lovely song where I sort of explained how wonderful this elixir was, but don't ask me to sing it because I don't remember.
Well, I would get the lyrics, then I would see what sort of song that Lee and Grant wanted musically, and then I would then write it, probably on the piano, and then I would score it for the instruments we used, usually only one or two, perhaps three. In this time, we didn't have a synthesizer. We were not allowed to use a synthesizer at Thames, because they had bands, and if they had the band there, the main band, and if we'd used a synthesizer, then the whole band would have been probably go on strike. So I had to choose different instruments. So I tried to use as many different instruments, and we did over the series. We used trombone, horn, bassoon, and guitar, and harp. Lots of different instruments. And of course, kids like that, and introduce them also to proper instruments, which of course you don't get a lot of today.
The Christmas specials were really good because, again, I think they were slightly longer, and we had like 2 weeks to do them. And obviously a big highlight was having Glenda Jackson in one of the Christmas specials, and that felt very special in itself.
I mean, ideally, we would like to have a really good story that's clever and interesting, plus all these comedy moments with a fantastic cast and some good jokes. And, we've almost, the Christmas special with Glenda Jackson was really good.
That was one that came really
almost
close.
Came,
Almost.
There were great acting, there was some great songs by Terry in it.
For the Glenda Jackson and Georgina Hale's Christmas show, we had a much bigger band. And I don't know how many we had then, but that was all sort of music in the sort of 1930s, 20s, 30s. A lot of fun, that one.
In certain episodes, you'd get to play two parts, and how they did it was, so for instance, I'd be Sally Simpkins and Gypsy Rosie. I remember this in one particular episode, which was really lovely actually, because you got to do something else entirely, which made it, it was interesting. But very often they'd do really clever things like you'd have a conversation with yourself on screen in the same shot. And what you'd have to do is record it all talking to nothing one side, and then you'd have to change, come back in, and stand the other way around, and then they'd, however they do it, but they put the shots together and it looks like you're talking to yourself. And that was just, I can remember thinking that was just amazing.
Of course, that was what was very exciting about playing the part, because it wasn't just playing one part. Playing T.Bag was great, but then on top of playing T.Bag, I could play all these other roles, hundreds of them, just kind of switch into there was the girl, there was the flapper outfit. I remember that, and she was from New York, wasn't she? She was like at the Gangsters Mall. I can't remember what the episode was though, but just endless, marvellous things to play. What a good job it was.
And the other dock leave drove me crazy because it was about a bank robbery and it was all about these satchels, and they all had different, there were I think 8 or 9 satchels, and they all had different things, and one had the witch's stuff in it that she was carrying around and the boy's stuff, but one had the money in or the gold in. And I remember I kept having to stop filming saying, excuse me, I think I've got the wrong valise. I think I've got the wrong bag here. And we used to have to open it up and say, no, you've got the right bag. I said, sorry. I got very confused about that. I mean, how it ever worked out right, I'll never know. But I mean, it did work out all right,
The grape feeding scene, thereby hangs a vine or two. Well, you see, there wasn't a great deal of time because the shooting schedule was pretty rough for everybody. I mean, everybody was sort of slaving away. But, you have a comedy scene with grape throwing. Well, I mean, when you read it, it's very funny. It's exceeding funny. When you actually come to do it, it's another matter because it requires a great deal of timing to aim a grape into somebody's mouth. It's a very funny thought. But when you actually come to do it, it's not easy. And when they don't go in the mouth, because then you start getting the giggles. And that is very difficult to overcome because every time a grape hits you in the eye rather than the mouth, I mean, you're gone. You're just gone. And I think we took longer over that grape scene than we did for the rest of the show. I mean, but I think it was quite funny.
Max Claffer, exit with a puff. No, puff, sorry. I had the wrong word again. That was wonderful. It was about a Hollywood producer, and he was doing a sort of a bit like Gone with the Wind. Exit with a puff. See, puff. Exit with a puff. I always got that wrong. Played Max Clapper, and it was wonderful. It was great. That was with Georgina Hale playing the witch.
But if you look at that episode, which we talked about, Exit with a Puff, some of the funniest scenes in that are with Matt Zimmerman when everybody keeps saying, I'll do the film if you give me your monocle. What is this with the monocle? It became completely bizarre. But you'd never have got a story like that without having, where's the ring going to be hidden?
And I mainly remember the scenes with John actually, and looking in that saucer, and constantly and sometimes even now, little phrases pop into my head, and sometimes. Even if I'm playing other parts, and of course I've played a lot of other parts since then, but there are bits of things that I remember from that used to amuse me, and phrases like that, top of the mountain to my man. I don't know, I said that too. But I still say it sometimes to people, but I don't remember saying, you stupid boy.
It's our homage to Dad's Army, of course. Jimmy Perry and David Croft were two of the writers that we admired a lot. Galton and Simpson, there were a few of them doing wonderful British comedies from the 60s and 70s. And Captain Mannering is one of the great comedy creations of all time, I think, played by Arthur Lowe. And we just loved it so much, the pair of us. We just always loved Dad's Army and just thought it was the greatest thing. Because it was like T.Bag, full of experienced older actors coming on and just being brilliant. And we just wanted to pay a little homage to that show.
Oh, I remember Bernard Breslau, who's from the Carry On films, was in one of the episodes, and I used to love the Carry On films, so that was really, really exciting. And Burt Kwok from Pink Panther, he was in one. So, meeting all these people that, I never thought in a million years I'd get to meet. That was brilliant.
People like a guy like Trevor Peacock, who you might not know, but he's been on Vicar of Dibley, and he's just an amazing actor. I think he did at least 2 episodes, I think, and they would come in and they would just be absolutely sensational. And I think it gave the show every week such a fresh energy, and it gave us such fresh energy as well. And to be honest, I personally think that was part of its success, was that you had this fresh energy and terrific casting.
we really benefited from the fact that we were able to use incredibly experienced actors who'd done it all. You know, they'd done all the theatre stuff and done musicals, and they'd really, you know, all these wonderful pros who'd just come in, and what they'd do is they'd take our lines and just lift them up 5 levels and just deliver them in a way that made them just seem, you know, so intelligent and rich and wonderful, and we really benefited from that, there's no doubt, and the show did. Lots of good grown-up actors in a kids show, and therefore it had an atmosphere of not being like a kids show in a funny way, although it clearly was. It had that level of expertise and intelligence about it that brought in a big audience. That's why it got such a huge audience, I think, you know, because, you know, mums and dads would watch it, and other people would watch it, and they'd all sort of hook in, and teenage, you know, students would watch it, and they'd see something in it, and that was always good.
So there were heaps of different characters in T.Bag because of all the people that she met. But sometimes certain actors came back as different characters again and again. And Matt Zimmerman was one of them. He played Doc Leaf, among many other parts. I think he was in all throughout. He was in a few of mine, and he was in them as well with Georgina.
Did you want to tell how these 2 writers came into my life? Is that what you want to know? Well, I was walking along a very dark street one night, and these 2 people jumped out and said, "We want to use you in our show." That's not true.
You know, there were certain actors that we just immediately, the first time we saw them, we knew they were, you know, had the right sort of attitude for T.Bag.
And there's a T.Bag actor.
Yeah, Matt was one of them. He's so big and bold and funny, and he gives such a big performance. So he was ideal, you know, and that's why we used him so many times.
I met them actually through the director, Leon Thaw. He was the one who first contacted me, and then I met Leon Grant, and, well, it was love at first sight, basically. And besides, I think I was the only American person in London at the time who would actually say the lines with any credibility. Those lines, of course, that Leon Thaw didn't rip out of the script and throw away.
And what they did was they brought a little bit of the theatre into the show. Yeah. You know, because television is just so famous for, you know, like the kind of naturalistic mumble, everything's got to be like this. And these people would come in and just have the bravery and the unembarrassedness, if that's a word, to just let it rip. And yet without it being over the top. That was the key.
T.Bag was acting. I mean, it was a challenge every time, you know. It was a challenge to do Doc Leaf, which was a different kind of a character, to Max Clapper, and it was just, you know, it was different. And what it was, I'll tell you what it was about T.Bag. Very family feeling, very rep feeling, especially after you've done one of them. And I was lucky enough to do, I think 4 episodes, I think I did, and with 2 different witches. But every time you got there, you knew everybody, and it was very family, and there was never any arguments, at least not on our side. But it was always pleasant. That was what the amazing thing.
You see, one of the things about the chemistry of working with a fellow actor, because I'd known Georgina all those years before, and we had done different parts in both Ken's films, there is a chemistry that happens. And so that in a way makes it so much easier. You don't have to sort of be polite in a very social way. You can say, "Here, I'm going to do what are you doing? I'm doing this." And so there's that rapport, that give and take, that I'm sure with something like T.Bag, when you have to be so farcical, I'm sure that atmosphere comes across in those characters, no matter what you're playing, because there is a give and take that you just do automatically. And that's a bonus.
Saul Wright. I loved Saul Wright. He was a very larger-than-life character, not unsimilar to myself. He was a record producer, and he was just absolutely insane about getting everything right, you see. And I always remember I can't remember the boy's name who played the rock and roll singer in it, but I know he went on to the Tomorrow People. And if I'm right, Leon Grant went on to write for the Tomorrow People as well. But I love Saul Wright because he was the kind of big character that I liked very, very much, you know.
I've got loads of moments. What I don't have is the perfect episode. That's the way I see it. Of the 94 episodes, I don't think there's one episode where I think it's faultless, where everything works wonderfully and everything comes together and there's not a thing wrong with it. And I guess maybe you expect too much. But all throughout the whole thing are wonderful scenes everywhere, like jewels all over the thing. I'm really proud of them. Often they just have to do with the actors giving a fantastic performance, or things just came together. It was a good scene and they made it terrific, or whatever it was. But there's dozens of those. You know, you can sort of dip into the show and find scenes or even sequences where you just think, this is just great. I'm really proud of this scene or this sequence, and it couldn't have been better. And then something will happen that was a change, or something that we'd written that wasn't maybe as good as it could have been, or something else, or something went wrong, or it didn't quite happen. So the way I see it is, it's like this big series full of lovely nuggets all the way through it, and you kind of forget where they are. And every time you watch an episode, there's maybe 4 or 5 moments in every episode where you just really go, that's great, that's... Oh, lovely.
Oh, well, I mean, in all good children's whatever, you never patronise to those kids. Even if you're doing the broadest pantomime, you don't patronise because those kids pick it up. And that's what was lovely with the scripts for T.Bag, that they weren't patronising. And so you played those parts, no matter how over the top you were, how farcical you were. You basically played them truthfully. Because if you don't with young people, they turn off immediately. You have to keep them interested. You know, once you say once upon a time, a kid will immediately listen. But then from then on, you have to be truthful. Otherwise, they'll go off and do something else. They get bored.
But whether the show influenced other shows, who can tell? I mean, we've heard lots of people say, in fact, I've met people at various functions and what have you will come up to me and say, I've come into television because of T.Bag, and I loved it when I was a kid, and it made me want to go into show business, and now I'm a director, and blah, blah, blah. It certainly had an influence on people, and therefore they maybe sort of went on. And I've heard that the Little Britain guys really liked it, for instance. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. Secondhand.
I know that Lily Savage loved it.
So there's, you know, it's fondly remembered by loads and loads of people.
Mainly camp people.
Yes, whether that's influenced their own work, I shudder to imagine. I don't know. Is the honest answer.
The reason I didn't do the last one is that it was at the time that Thames Television had lost its franchise, and the whole kind of studio was convulsing, rather. I think I had another job to go to, and effectively Thames were kind of going through, you know, it was going down in flames as a franchise, so their final series was put together under completely different circumstances.
And I remember we'd just done one series, and then I was asked to go and have lunch with our executive producer that said, I'm slightly making this up, maybe there was a 4-week or 3-week gap, and then could we do another series because it was going to stop.
But I think the series had changed so much by not having a girl in it, that we could kind of go around collecting things, which was basically the essence of the show, that it did become a slightly different series, to be honest.
Yeah, we were thinking, isn't this formula becoming just that, a bit formula now, and but the other thing was, we'd written a book called The Amazing Adventures of T.Bag, which I think sold about 4 copies, and we thought, well, it was quite a sweet idea, the whole idea that it was T.Bag's birthday, and you still had the quest, but this time it was T.Bag going on the quest, and we thought, well, that's basically the same sort of idea, it's got the same pulse to it, but it's different in that we don't have the little girl anymore, and we were always much more interested in T.Bag and T-shirt anyway, and we said, well, why don't we take the plot of the book, because nobody's seen it, nobody's read it really, and why don't we use that and make that into a series? And of course there's no girl in the book.
I was basically handed the script. Nobody actually told me what T.Bag was about, and I just took it from the scripts, what I read, and talked to Lee and Grant about what their idea of it was and things. And I think I took it away from, it was all flat scenery when the previous ones, and I didn't really know that, so I put proper scenery into it, or what I thought was the right scenery for it and things, and went about it as a proper drama rather than a comic cut book cutout things, which I think the intention was originally.
Having young Bia in the last series was cool, because it meant that I didn't have to be, you know, as young perhaps as I had been in previous series. I could be older and I could be more kind of condescending towards him, and he took on the role of, you know, like the young, innocent, naive boy that I had been in the earlier series, which was sweet, and it also lent a different perspective to myself and Georgina's characters, because we became more of a comedy double act, and we were both sort of comedy foils, as opposed to before it would have just been Georgina. Like, I think in that last series there was a scene where a cake exploded and we both ended up covered you know, in soot and dust, whereas before the cake would have exploded and just Georgina would have ended up like that. In that series it was both of us, because obviously then you had another person that could look at us and kind of go wah wah wah, you know, basically.
But we also thought we can't just have T.Bag and T-shirt the whole time on the screen, because the way the stories pan out, it kind of needs the three main protagonists. We'll need a third, and then we had the idea of, well, couldn't it be a relative of T-shirt, and as you say, explore that family tree a little bit. And so we came up with this idea that he's got this mysterious cousin from the east. I don't know. I'm sure it was because we liked the pun.
I'm still wondering, and I only thought of this the other day, that, you know, I mean, Jim, I was only thinking about Jim as, you know, he's Thomas's grandfather.
Don't even go there.
So therefore, he must be a shirt or something. I don't know. We never explored that one.
No, probably best left alone.
I know it was difficult for Neville. I know on occasions I think I lost my temper, because by then John and I were really established in the characters and where they were going, what they'd done, etc., etc. And somebody new coming in didn't know as much about those characters as we did. So I had to tread a little bit carefully. But at the end, all was well.
I think my relationship with you and Lee was quite close, and it was fun that you would come and go and go to the cinema and see some film like E.T. and come back and ask me if I can, or write it in and say, is this possible, and things. It was quite good fun trying to do Spielberg effects on my budget, but we achieved quite a lot on it.
I mean, Grant and I were working at Thames Television. We actually had an office at Thames Television. This is when we were working on Spats. And we also had Michelangelo going, and T.Bag was going. They were all regular shows that were being recommissioned. Now, I remember being there when Thames Television was actually cancelled, the day when these franchises were up for grabs. And we were actually at Thames, and the announcement came on the news, and there was a huge shock from all the staff at Thames. They knew they were going to be out of work. But I don't know, probably did we just guess that all these shows were going to be cancelled?
No, I think I do remember, actually. What happened was that when Thames Television lost its franchise, and Lee's described that day when everyone went, because it wasn't really expected, a new company took over, Carlton Television, and we were tipped the wink that they wanted to pick up one of our shows, and we were hoping it would be T.Bag. And to the extent that we started writing a 10th series, or started to sort of brainstorm it and sort of break it down. And right in the middle of us doing that, we heard that they wanted to pick up Michelangelo instead, which was the show that we thought at that time was kind of running out of steam, and we'd have quite happily let it go. And in fact, they said, no, it's Michelangelo is the one we want to pick up, and we're going to let T.Bag go. And I think we were pretty disappointed, actually, because we'd kind of got really used to T.Bag, and the production values had been going up and up. And the truth is, I think it just was, although T.Bag doesn't look like an expensive show, it was quite expensive, because every week it was new casts, new sets, new costumes, brand new, expensive costumes that are on screen for like a minute. Whereas in a show like Michelangelo, you've got a living room and a kitchen that's used for the whole series, and so the cost of that is spread across all the episodes, makes it a cheaper show. Although T.Bag somehow looks cheaper than Michelangelo, but I'm sure it must have cost quite a bit more. It was quite a big budget show.
The show came, I think, to a natural end. It was series 9, and the format in the last series changed a lot, in that it was all about T.Bag's birthday, which was the story in the book that they released. To be honest, it was a really weird time as well, because Thames TV lost their franchise, and the whole studios were being stripped bare. You know, that the life and soul had gone from the place, and I was 17 doing my A-levels, and I just think that it kind of came to a natural end, to be honest. I think if they had have done another one, I probably wouldn't have done it anyway, to be honest.
It was a great job. Lots of people loved the show. And at the end you thought, here was I not wanting to do a kids' television series, and at the end of it you thought how privileged you were to have done one, but not labelled children's television.
But after all these years, to know that a lot of these people still treasure the memory of having worked on this show is fantastic.
What's nice in a way is that although John has grown up and he's a little taller than he was before, but he looks exactly the same. But everybody looks exactly the same. I mean, Grant and Lee, I think, are taking some sort of youth tablet, I don't know, but they look exactly the same to me.
And then seeing everybody today has been really quite overwhelming. It's been lovely, and nobody's changed at all.
It's like a sort of class reunion going back to sixth form or something. But it's great. Everyone was really happy to see each other again.
I think if anyone said that they weren't nervous, I think they'd be lying. I think we're all a bit nervous about kind of getting back together, because, you know, you do something for any length of time, and you look back on it with fond memories. You're kind of worried, actually, will we click again? Well, you know, how will it be? But it's just been fantastic, and to see everyone again, and to get on with everyone again is just amazing.
I just think it was the greatest, not because I was in it, but it was a wonderful show. So many people liked it. Mums and dads liked it, not just children. And it just appealed to everybody.